This show is brought to you by PivX, private instant verified transactions. With its groundbreaking zero coin staking and masternodes, PivX is the top privacy currency. Feel free to trade some on Binance or Bittrex. And for more information, go to www.pivx.org. What a guest we've got lined up today on ITK Crypto with me, Tom White, and Cryptosi as well. But we've got Kozel from Decred, someone we've been looking to get on the show for quite a while, particularly excited about this one. So, hello, Kozel, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing very fine. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Great to have you on here. What we're going to do, we're going to ask you a series of questions, but the first one is something that we ask everyone. And what we say is just to tell us who you are and what your working background was prior to getting into crypto.
That may come as a bit of a surprise to some people, but it's not that my background was something as much as it still is, because I still have my day job. And essentially, I come from a teaching background. I teach foreign languages. And this is something I've done for a number of years and something I still do to this day.
Oh, okay. Well, that is interesting. Well, what we've had, when you say that it might surprise us, we've had all sorts on here, Cryptos. We've had a former pastor. We've had Cryptos. We've had some really different ones, haven't we?
Yeah, we've had pastors. We had a professional poker player, professional golfers, ex-bankers. Yeah, we've had pretty much everything.
Yeah. I suppose a teacher in the mix is not really that surprising.
Yeah, teachers actually quite tame compared to what we've had. So, great stuff. So in that case, if you were teaching and you still are teaching, what got you into crypto?
I have to say it came about a bit. It was quite unexpected because of my let's say teaching background at the university. Obviously, we had to do a lot of studying, a lot of reading, and I came across a few books, a few fiction novels that kind of got me interested into this cypherpunk movement or mindset or mentality. And later on, I happened by chance upon Bitcoin a few times in my past, in fact, because I think it's an experience quite familiar to a lot of people who've been hearing about Bitcoin for a long time, but they were perhaps not as knowledgeable about it, or they didn't know what it was. But the more they kept hearing about it, the more interested they got. So I then researched it a little bit. I don't really remember how long ago it was, but it seems like a good few years. It must have been around 2012-ish, 2013, I believe. So I decided to gamble a little bit, and I acquired some, and then I kind of forgot about it for a long period of time. I tried looking at it and following the news, following development in crypto. Well, what I essentially thought crypto was, because up until quite recently, for me, Bitcoin was kind of synonymous with crypto. And I mean, I thought, as a lot of people probably did, about maybe learning how to trade, and but no, this was entirely beyond me. So it so happened that I kind of forgot about it. I kept checking on it periodically, and yeah, that's more or less how I got into the entire crypto ecosystem, so to speak.
Yeah, so it's just something that
curiosity.
You heard about it, you're interested in it, you looked into it, and that's what's brought you to where we are today, and that brings us on to Decred. So what is Decred, and what is it built to do?
So Decred is an autonomous digital currency that by some people still to this day is described as Bitcoin with governance. because essentially it came about from, let's say, perceived inability to exert any kind of influence upon Bitcoin as a project. It was started by developers who developed BTC Suite, which is an alternative full node implementation of Bitcoin written in Go. And essentially what these developers learned, what they found out, was that it was nearly impossible to kind of get through to hearing the Bitcoin project. So what they thought was that pretty soon, if things continued on this path, it would lead to some kind of governance related issues. Much what's happened.
So it's quite interesting. What I want to pick up on is something you said quite early there, that it's basically Bitcoin, but it's, you know, with some governance. Like, can you just go into a little bit more detail about that? Because there are a lot of people who just see cryptocurrency in general as having no governance.
What I don't want to do is I don't want to imply that Bitcoin doesn't have governance, because, well, there are a few schools of thought on that. Some people see it as having no governance. Some people see it as having governance, but it's not formal, so to speak. What Decred did was it iterated upon Bitcoin and introduced a few, let's say, changes that allows it to be adaptable, pretty much, to upgrade the protocol in a timely manner, and to make sure, above all, that the community stays together, that there are no situations in which certain contentious changes or agreements lead to the fracturing of the community, because that's a side effect that we think is especially harmful in crypto.
So that is the kind of Decred governance process, also known as is it Politeia? Did you say?
Yeah, Politeia.
So what you've just described there, I suppose, it is the Decred governance process. Is that fair, or is there more to it than that?
There is much more to it than that, and you've touched upon something that I love thinking about and talking about. So feel free to stop me, because this is a subject that I might talk your ear off on. So Politeia is only one aspect of Decred governance, the Decred governance system, because essentially the Decred governance system is based upon a thing that we call tickets. So we have a ticketing system that's built into our blockchain, and it's part of what we now call a multi-factor consensus system, which is essentially a system that combines proof of work and proof of stake. Now, it's extremely important to not to take it to go a bit deeper into how these are actually implemented, because when people hear proof of work or proof of stake, they already have some kind of ideas, but it's really how these two elements are implemented, how they go together, that determines how the entire system works. So we have a proof of work element in our system, which is miners that mine blocks, that put transactions into blocks, submit them, and for that they are rewarded a portion of the block reward. Because what happens then, after a block is mined, the system selects 5 tickets that vote on the validity of the block. They don't vote on the validity of the block that's being mined. They vote on the validity of the previous block. So what that does is it prevents miners from having too much influence, from essentially being able to authenticate and authorize and validate the blocks that they themselves mine, which is this kind of 2-factor authentication system. So the voters or stakeholders essentially through staking, through these tickets, vote on the validity of these blocks. And on the one hand, it's the validity is determined by the version of the software that you're running to make sure that the blocks that are being mined adhere to the current consensus rules. And if they don't, they get a no vote, or a vote that votes no, so against the block. And what that does is, since 5 tickets are selected and are to be included in each block, for every ticket that votes against the block, the proof of work block reward, or the proof of work portion of the block reward, is reduced. So if you have 4 positive votes, you get 4/5 of the block reward. That attempts to try and keep the miners in check, that they mine the version of the blocks or that the stakeholders want them to mine. So essentially, these miners are kind of reduced to service providers, and so that's one level. This is called block voting. At the moment, it's more or less automatic, but we may add some additional rules to it in the future. Now, the second layer, or the second portion of it, is consensus voting, which is every time that we need to, so for example, introduce a new feature that requires a change in the consensus system, we vote on it. So that's and this is interestingly enough, this is something which we are going to experience very soon, since we're in the process of upgrading for the next consensus vote. And what that does is it requires 95% of the proof of work miners to be mining the most recent, the newest version of the blocks, and 75% of the proof of stake voters to be running the most recent, the most current version of the software in order to trigger this vote. Now, what the vote does is it votes for the activation of a feature that's already in the newest software, and that doesn't. It's also, it can't be stopped once the vote passes. So no developer, no one essentially, once the voting threshold is reached, can prevent it from happening. So what it does is it requires 75% approval or disapproval to make the vote binding. And if threshold is reached after, I believe, which is the period of time that we give people to upgrade their software, these new features automatically activate. And the third part is Politeia, which is the system that allows us to vote on how 10% of every block reward that goes to our treasury is spent. So we can vote on things such as hiring a PR agency, or funding marketing initiatives, or perhaps having some other cool features developed. And this is all done through Politeia.
It's fascinating that, because I'm going to bring Cryptosi in, Kozel, because Cryptosi and I get asked so much about governance, right, in crypto. So this is incredible for us and for our listeners as well, because I mean, Cryptosi more so than me, we get questions about this all the time, Cryptosi. So it's great, isn't it, to get this explained so well?
Yeah, it's the thing with Decred is it's a very, very strong model. The The guys behind it have been in crypto for a long time, and it does definitely show. One thing that Tom said earlier was that he joined crypto from a cypherpunk kind of background, not even a background so much, but from that angle. So he didn't come into it purely for the profits. And you find that these types of people are really looking into the system in depth. And I just wanted to kind of simplify slightly what Tom was saying about the three different levels. So the first one he explained is the way that they actually secure.
One second, Crypto. Just to explain to the listeners, Kozel's name is also Tom as well, just in case it's confusing people.
Oh yeah, sorry. Kozel's what he did say, the first level that he said was actually how they secure the network. And it's unique in that there are very few projects which use a combination of proof of work and proof of stake. There are some arguments to say that proof of work is slightly more secure because of the way it works than proof of stake. But there are now, I can think maybe 3 or 4 projects, decent sized projects, that have got this kind of hybrid setup, which you end up getting almost the best of both worlds. And then the second layer, which he said, which was about consensus, that's extremely important if we relate it to projects like Bitcoin as opposed to Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum as opposed to Ethereum Classic. And what happens when you have these shifts in features that maybe some people don't agree with, and they say, okay, we're going to go off and create our own branch, is that you have a real period of instability. You lose a lot of your momentum. You lose a lot of power within the project. People will go from one project to another, and then it's never turned out to be good. It's good in that people have got the freedom to do it, but for the project, it's generally not good. It's better if we have methods of measuring consensus. That's why that second layer, to me, is probably the most important one. Although it can always be trumped by the first layer, people can always fork. It's really good that they've got this second layer where people have got the opportunity to say, okay, we like this feature this much, we should implement it, or we know that not enough people like it, so therefore we shouldn't implement it. The third feature is the one that's probably emulated the most, and is still the one that I would say needs the most. It needs the most work from a social point of view. Like, people kind of need to get used to using these tools and using them more. And that is the budget. With the budget, then you've got a funding model for the actual project that will last pretty much forever. And not very many cryptos have that. It's very important. You'll have a lot of projects where they'll raise ICO funds, or they'll raise funds that will last them 2 years, 3 years maybe. But then when the funds have run out, you have to rely on people doing things for the love of coding, or for the love of the project. And we've seen time and time again that that's often not enough. And I think those are the, if Kozel doesn't mind me simplifying them, those are the really, if you simplify it for people who are not that experienced within crypto, those are the real reasons why projects with stronger governance, and Kozel's absolutely right to say Bitcoin does have governance, but it's not as good. With a process like what Decred have, you could take a few months, poll the whole community, and then have a vote, and then make a decision. With Bitcoin, a decision could take years, and usually does. So it's great to see. It's great to see Decred take their governance so seriously.
This podcast has been brought to you by Rhubarb Media. Rhubarb Media are the branding specialists behind successful crypto projects such as PivX, Vendible, and Libertaria. The Rhubarb style is both loved and respected the world over. So if you want your project to appeal to techies and everyday users alike, give Rhubarb Media a try. You cannot possibly be disappointed. Link is in the description.
One thing I'd like to add is that what this model does is it also prevents minority forks or sustained chain splits, because although in most proof of work secure chains, you can do that. There is really high incentive against that in Decred, because the ticketing system and this first level essentially, to a very, very high degree, prevents you from just splitting off the chain, because if you introduce your own consensus rules under this hybrid system, this multi-factor consensus system, in order to extend your chain, you also need these tickets. And if these tickets are not present on your chain, at the moment, the block is mined. It will not get the required votes. It will not get the required approval, and therefore it will not be added to the chain. So this method kind of makes sure that any such attempt is, in theory, I believe, possible. It's just that it's not very feasible because it would be ludicrously expensive, and you would have to keep throwing money at the chain in order to acquire this voting power, in order to keep extending it. We've written, well, more knowledgeable people than I have written a few articles about how that works, detailing everything step by step. And as you go through these articles, these steps, you can understand the scale of complexity that this system employs in order to prevent that from happening. Because, as you mentioned, it causes, such a split causes tremendous confusion or upset in the community, and also it is unhelpful in that it always leads to a kind of brain drain. So some developers will side with one solution, with one implementation, and the other ones will stay with what they've known, and it inevitably leads to, as you've said, the project, or at least part of it, losing steam in the process.
Yeah, with regards to budget proposals, so we're talking about the highest level, Politeia. What factors do you feel make for a good proposal?
We've seen a couple of proposals that had some interesting ideas, but they were, let's say, not thought through or not well thought through in terms of how they would be actually developed and applied. So I think we've written some guidelines on how to write a decent proposal in terms of what items to include, what you need to cover, and definitely it needs to include a description of your idea, why and how that would be beneficial to the overall Decred ecosystem, because you have to remember that this fund is not some kind of a piggy bank that the stakeholders will use to just fund some cool ideas, however cool that they might be. This is our war chest. This is our insurance policy, so to speak. This is what allows us to keep pushing and developing, even in dire financial conditions, or during this bear market that we're having. So this is not something that we're going to take very, very lightly, because essentially, since 10% of every block reward goes to this fund, and since now the stakeholders are in control of it, no one thinks of it as being, let's say, no one's money, right? Everyone treats it as, if I had to pay for this out of my own pocket, would I do it? So I believe everyone's being a little bit more responsible with it. And other things that are a good idea to be included are things such as milestones. So what you're going to deliver, how quickly, and other things such as, obviously, how much money your proposal would take. And I think the most important, or one of the most important parts, is whether you have either the development chops, or simply speaking, the developing power in order to make it happen. Because despite it being called a proposal system, this is something that necessitates you bringing your own kind of labor with you. This is not a suggestion system. So, for example, you can't propose that Decred develop feature X, right? Because no one's going to take time out of their busy days to make your dreams come true. So in order to see something implemented, you need to be able to bring it to fruition. And the proposal system is, simply speaking, a means of getting funding for it, provided the stakeholders decide it's good investment of treasury funds.
The next question regards voter apathy. Now, from what I've seen, voter apathy seems to be a big problem within like all crypto governance, especially within budgets and things like that. Why do you think that apathy is so high? If you do agree that it's so high, and what things do you feel that we could do to reduce this apathy?
This is a really, really tough question, but I've seen it mentioned a couple of times in a few places that this problem is not unique to crypto. That's essentially, we experience this on a daily basis, whether with general elections in individual countries or whatever. So I think, and this is just my own personal uneducated opinion on this topic, since I haven't really studied it, it might have something to do with people believing that their vote doesn't really have that much power. So once people notice, or once people see that they do have some kind of influence, or that, let's say, features or projects that are proposed to be developed are something that interests them, they will pay more attention. And definitely promoting and raising awareness of this system, of, let's say, any kind of proposal funding system is something that could alleviate this problem to some degree. But probably there are many more approaches that one could take, but this is what immediately comes to mind.
Yeah, I think you've got a very good point there, Kozel, because it definitely isn't something that is just held back to only to crypto. We've got a few more questions. These are questions that we ask kind of all of the guests that come on ITK Crypto. And the first question is, if you had to go all in, so if you had to invest every last penny on a project, which project would it be and why? And you can only say projects that have been released. Obviously, you cannot choose Decred. So any other project, which one would it be?
Oh goodness! First of all, I want to make it clear to everyone listening that you should never invest your last penny into something that. Well, you should never invest your last penny if it's not something that you're ready to accept as a loss, as a potential loss. So only invest something that you're ready to lose. So I wouldn't advocate this as a good choice. And since I can't choose Decred, I have to say, being completely honest, that I'm not really all that familiar with what other projects are doing at the moment, or they're promising. I was completely my breath was taken away by Decred, and this is something that I personally chose to research at the expense of other projects. But I suppose I'm not going to be particularly original if I say Bitcoin, because I think it's got a very long track record, and there are still things such as Lightning Network that's being worked on for it at the moment, and that I hope to see used more often. And there is something peculiarly interesting to me in privacy coins, so maybe Monero. Although, again, full disclosure, I know only the Cliff Notes version of how the project implements things, so one or the other. But with no such restrictions, I think, just like a few people that I know, say if the bag's not heavy, it's not the right bag. So I suppose I would stand behind the project that I've researched the most at this point, and that would be Decred.
Okay, yeah, that is very interesting. Bitcoin is actually the one which the most people say for various reasons. Some because it's the safest, mostly because it is the longest known, the longest lasting. But recently we had our last guest said because of the liquidity, which is another factor which I guess a lot of people.
Yeah. It's impossible to overlook this.
Another thing which just came to mind, actually, as you said, that you do have an interest in privacy coins, it's as it stands, does Decred have any privacy functions built in? If not, does it have any plans to build any privacy functions?
Yes, indeed it does. Although it's the details are just so private that no one really knows what Decred privacy is going to look like. Last I heard, there were two separate teams working on two separate models for privacy, but the developers are keeping their cards so close to their chests that it's really impossible to tell. But yes, privacy is being worked on from two different, let's say, approaches. I want to say, and yeah, there is stuff in the works.
Yeah, so moving forward, I would assume with the way you've got your kind of second layer of consensus set up, it would be a case whereby they would add the code to the GitHub. It would already be within the product. It would already be within the software, and then you would have a vote to say whether or not we should activate this new type of privacy. Would that be? Am I accurate in saying that's how it would play out?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so. If these new features required a change in the consensus system, then this is exactly how it would play out. These changes, these features would already be incorporated into the newest version of the software, and once it reached the required number of votes or support after this predefined period of time, which is about 8,000 or so blocks, so give or take a month, these would be automatically activated. And yeah, I also want to say that we're not. It's not just a let's say kind of blanket statement of approval that for a given feature, that if it's already implemented into the newest version of the software, that it will pass, because pretty much if the stakeholders disagree with it being activated, they can vote against it, and if they so choose and vote to reject this activation upon reaching the same level of support for the against option, it will not be activated. It will stay dormant. So
that's excellent. It's like I said before, it's a very unique way of doing it. And so Kozel, I would just like to say thank you very, very much for giving up your time and coming to talk to us about Decred, which is definitely by market cap, it's definitely the biggest project that we've discussed in such detail. And in terms of governance and things like that, it is the most in-depth.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for bearing with me. I wish I could be a little bit more concise, but this is something that blows my mind still to this day. So yeah, I just love chatting about it.
It is definitely super difficult to be so concise about such complex issues. Where can people go to find out more about yourself and in particular about Decred and Politeia?
If you want to learn about Politeia, you go to Politeia's website, which is let me look it up really quickly. I think it's proposals.decred.org. I believe. I hope I'm getting this right. For any kind of information about the Decred project itself, you can visit our chat channels on Matrix. You can join our Telegram groups. Follow us on Twitter, definitely, and drop by Reddit.
Excellent. I'll just bring Tommy back. Tommy, have you got any last questions you want to pose to Kozel?
No, first of all, I need to know if you can all hear me.
Yeah.
I can definitely hear you.
Yeah, I had some technical issues, just letting the listeners know. I had a few technical issues there with my microphone. But no, that was absolutely brilliant. Really, really interesting. That, I mean, the governance chat that we had there was just absolutely fantastic. Really, really, you've taught me a lot there as well.
I'm glad I could help.
Yeah, well, we've got some answers to our listeners who ask us about it all the time. We can point them to this podcast straight away. So I just want to stress how grateful we are to have you on, and hopefully we'll get you on again and have a little update.
Thank you very much. I'll look forward to chatting with you again.
Fantastic. Right, that's us done. Thanks very much indeed, Tom.
Thank you. See you.
This podcast was brought to you by Meros Cryptocurrency. Meros is a cryptocurrency payment system that does what cryptocurrency originally intended to do. Be a practical and secure form of direct payment, Meros utilises the best of current technology in a powerful new way. It introduces a groundbreaking consensus mechanism called merit caching. This enables Meros to be both feeless and instant while maintaining the same level of integrity of traditional networks like Bitcoin. To find out how you can participate in the future of crypto payments, go to meroscrypto.io now.